Hello and welcome to our tutorial. So in this tutorial we're going to take our character here and we're going to do some work on her. We're going to do some sculpting. So I'm going to go into edit mode here and I'm going to select the ring of verts here around the base of the neck, and I'm going to press V to create a cut. I'm going to press L and that's going to select just the head, and I'm going to press P, which is separate by selection. So now I've created my head here, which is part of my model, as a separate object. And I'm going to do a little bit of sculpting on this here. Now I'm going to use a reference image. Now this is my reference image here, so this is what I'm going to use. Not a beautiful figure, but a face of an orc. So I have that over on my other screen, and I'm going to use that as my sort of my reference point. I'm going to press the N key, N key to get rid of that menu, and I'm going to go to shading and turn to matte cap, and I'll select this guy here. And finally, I'm just going to go to user preferences and make sure that I've got CUDA selected. So I have a slightly older graphics card here, so a 760. So just to make sure that everything is working. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a look at how I would set up this character here for sculpting. And I don't know if I've got a beautiful Blender 2.8. I don't know why that keeps disappearing. Alright, so we'll move on. We're going to take this here, and I'm going to have a look at how many verts are in it. So I'm going to go into edit mode and press A, and we can tell down here there's 11,000 verts in that. So that's not enough to do our sculpting. So I'm going to take the body here and press H to hide it, and I'm going to select my head here, and this is what we're going to sculpt. Now there's two ways to do this. I can add a multi-resolution modifier and increase the amount of geometry that I have on the head, but that will evenly distribute all of the geometry, the extra geometry. So I'll get as much extra geometry here in the back of the neck as I will here. Well, probably a little bit more here because there's more geometry to start with, but not a huge amount more. Whereas if I use a different technique called dynamic topology, which is turned on here, now I can only add detail where I want it. So first things first, I'm going to use the grab tool here, and I want to move the chin forward. So press F and scale this up a bit. We're going to move out our chin area to kind of give this character a bigger and more square sort of jaw. Now we're not going to worry too much about the beauty of this right now. So the face is still slightly narrow as it comes up here, and we're going to increase our cheeks here. Again, this is all very crude at the moment, and we can move this slightly forward. Now we'll be sculpting in lots of detail here, but just as a starting point. We're just using the grab tool. I'm going to take our character's ear and increase that in size there. Okay, so that's going to be the starting point. And we're going to then move on and move to a different brush. Before I do that, I'm going to hold down the shift key, and it's going to smooth this out a little bit. So the smooth, its strength is a bit too high here, so I'm losing too much detail. So, okay, so that's not too bad a position to start with. Okay, so I'm going to go to clay strips, and this is my tool of choice. So I'm going to press F here, make a nice big brush, and then add in some volume. Now, just to point out, we have up here a symmetry lock on with an X mirror symmetry on, so everything I draw on one side is mirrored on the other side. So just to be aware that the reason I'm getting geometry on both sides is because I've sort of asked it to or told it to do that. Okay, so when we hold down the control key, we can also invert the brush, so we can make an indentation as well as making a as well as adding volume. Okay. Okay. Okay, so, and the amount of detail that's added is a function of how zoomed in we are. So if I keep zooming in, I can add in a lot more detail. So the our position in the viewport, looking at the viewport, is very important. So what I want to do now is this orc, the reference image we're using, doesn't have big fangs or anything. So let's start having a little look at the mouth here. So actually, we'll just look from the side here. We're going to take this nose, I'm going to go back to grab, and I'm going to lift this up a bit and make it a more snouty kind of nose. Okay, and we'll widen it out a bit. Okay, before we go any further. Okay, and next what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my clay strips tool. I'm going to press F and make my brush a bit smaller, and I'm going to try and put in detail from the lips. Okay. Now I'm going to turn off my my symmetry tool just for a minute, because this guy has an asymmetrical sort of mouth, so it goes down on this side. Okay, and we'll press F here, make this brush even smaller, and then I'm holding down the control key here to kind of cut in a smaller sort of or gouge out a smaller kind of mouth opening. I'm going to make this slightly longer here. Okay, and maybe not, maybe angle it downwards rather than upwards. Make him a little more inhospitable. Okay, so we're going to try and find sort of the line of the muscles that are in this jaw here. I'll find the position that they're going to move in, and I want to seriously shorten this nose if I can, so I'm going to go back to grab and make this much bigger, and then just move everything up. Okay, and when I said everything, I meant both sides. It's not beautiful, but we can fix that. Okay, so we just have to be careful here that we don't get this ridge here, this wall, that doesn't get too thin, or we'll end up with issues. Okay. Now, so what we're trying to do is elongate this this area here between the mouth and the nose. Smooth that off a little bit. Okay, so now I want to add in additional sort of features here. And let me now the reason my nose didn't work out there is I turned off my symmetrical sculpting, but that's okay. That nose is just fine now. Okay. Okay, so before I go any further, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump out to I'm just going to go not from clay strip, sorry, into object mode. I'm going to very quickly save this, so I'll save this as, we'll call it character 1 orc. What I'm going to do here in object mode is I'm going to click here in the eye and go add UV sphere, and I'm going to scale it down. I'm going to rotate it, whoops, on the x-axis by 90 degrees, and then I'm just going to position this, so GY. Move this back, move it down a bit. Yeah, that's all good. And then from the front, I'm going to take that and go Shift D to duplicate, and then Escape, and then GX, so I can just move it across here and try and get into roughly the same position. So these are going to be my two eyes, or my eyeballs. Now, I'm not going to do anything with them. I'm simply going to position them and then use them to sculpt around. So go back to my character and go back into sculpt mode. And now we'll do a little bit of work on the eye with our X mirror turned on. So let's do one eye and then see where we get. So I'm going to lower my brush size. My strength's still quite high, so I'm going to turn it down, and I'm on clay strips. So because I jump back out into object mode, dynamic topology is turned off, so I need to turn this back on. So now I can add more geometry. So I'll make it maybe a little bit stronger. So now I can, using the control key to cut, I can also use my brush here to add geometry in around the eye. Okay, and then what we're trying to do here is build sort of a convincing sort of kind of eyelid. So normally you would have so an additional sort of structure here at the top for your eyelid, and then it would be in, you know, it would have to literally go backwards in towards the model. So we're sort of cutting away here. I'm going to smooth that a little bit. And it's too bad there, so we cut that out a little bit more. So again, it's going to increase the strength. So we're still sort of at a very early stage in this, so what we're trying to do is create kind of broad strokes at this stage. And we'll come back and fix a lot of this. So I'll have a little bit more volume here. We'll smooth that off a little bit. And we'll definitely cut in here a little bit. Give a bit more definition. And cut in here at the back of the nose a bit, to make it look like there's a flow from one to the other. Okay, so that looks a lot better, but it's far from perfect. So I need to do a little bit more with the bottom here. It doesn't look right. The eyeball looks like it's floating. So we need to add sort of a bottom eyelid in here. Okay, so again, far from perfect, but not too bad. Now let's go over and have a look at this ear. So this is not great, so we'll have a go at sculpting this a little more convincingly. And we'll add in here. Okay. Try and give it a bit more volume here down the bottom. And then we will do a little more volume here at the top, and then we will use the grab tool to make this a little more stand out just a little bit more. Okay. So I'm just aware of how long we have recorded for, so that's a good 20 minutes. So I'm going to stop at this point, and then we're going to start at this point in our next recording.